When you hear the title Bride of Chucky, the first thing you're probably going to think of is Bride of Frankenstein, the 1935 sequel to Frankenstein starring Boris Karloff. That's the movie we see Tiffany watching in the bathtub early on in Bride of Chucky.
She's alive!
If you haven't seen it, there are some similarities. Primarily, the main message of Frankenstein and Bride of Frankenstein, which is actually just told to us verbatim in the movie. There's a character for Mary Shelley, the author of the Frankenstein novel, and she explains the moral of the story before we jump into it.
The punishment that befell a mortal man who dared to emulate God.
Bride of Chucky explores similar territory. Although it has no opening where Don Mancini just straight up tells the audience what the movie is about, it tells the story of Tiffany Valentine, who collects the pieces of the Chucky doll and stitches them back together to try to bring back her ex-boyfriend Charles Lee Ray, but ends up regretting it when she's treated poorly by him. I'm going to talk about the more specific homages that Bride of Chucky paid to Bride of Frankenstein, but there is another horror movie that, ironically, probably influenced Bride of Chucky way more. To learn the significance of Tiffany's nail file, stick around to the end of this video. Welcome to Things You Missed. Back in 2019, I made a series of videos on the Child's Play movies, the first 3 movies in the Chucky franchise. So if you want to watch those, you can check out this playlist. And if you're already watching that playlist, now you know why I'm suddenly significantly less awkward. Bride of Chucky is a sequel to Child's Play 3, taking place no more than a couple of months after. It would be the first movie not to feature series protagonist Andy Barclay, because they screwed themselves in the third one by recasting Andy with an older actor, and now that actor is too old to play Andy because the movie is set while he's still a teen. I mean, they could go back to the original Andy, who is now the perfect age, but then it would clearly be 2 different people. I think a lot of people probably just wanted to see Brad Dourif back as Chucky though, and they would have gotten their wish. Let's get into the things you missed. In both Bride of Frankenstein and Bride of Chucky, the revivals are triggered by electricity. The voodoo spell used to bring back Chucky involves a supernatural storm cloud issuing a strike of lightning. Then Chucky kills Tiffany by electrocuting her in the bath and uses the spell to transfer her soul into another doll. This time Chucky is stitched together by hand after Tiffany retrieved the pieces that were torn apart in the giant spinning fan at the end of Child's Play 3. This gives him a similar look to Frankenstein's monster, who is famously stitched together by his creator. In both movies, the titular couples don't end up getting along.
Friend? Friend?
But as I mentioned, I don't think Bride of Frankenstein was the biggest inspiration for the 4th Chucky movie. If you look at some of the marketing, it becomes very clear that Universal Pictures was trying to capitalize on the success of a more recent franchise, as the official poster is a direct parody of Scream 2, and the logo, with its pointy K, is basically a ripoff of the Scream logo. Scream took the horror world by storm in 1996, thanks in part to its horror genre satire and abundant self-awareness. Scream is basically a slasher movie that knows it's a slasher movie, and Scream 2 satirizes the cliches of horror movie sequels. The opening scene of Scream references many horror movies that came before it in the iconic "Do you like scary movies" dialogue, which includes references to Halloween, Nightmare on Elm Street, and Friday the 13th. The opening scene of Bride of Chucky does a very similar thing. We look inside the evidence room at the Lockport Police Department, where we see Michael Myers' mask from Halloween, Freddy Krueger's glove from Nightmare on Elm Street, and Jason's mask from Friday the 13th. This may also be Leatherface's chainsaw from the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. A cop gathers up the remains of Chucky and brings them to Tiffany, who takes him out with her sharp nail file, which has this curved tip that makes it look like the knife used by Ghostface in the Scream movies. Additionally, there's a moment during that opening scene of Scream where the killer refers to Casey as Blondie.
Can you handle that, Blondie?
Chucky's bride ends up being a blonde woman whose soul gets transferred into a black-haired doll, so she bleaches the hair back to blonde while listening to Blondie. The name of the Blondie song is Call Me. The killer in Scream intimidates victims by calling them on the phone, and Tiffany hires her neighbor to transport the dolls in Bride by calling him on the phone so that he doesn't find out that she's one of the dolls. Shout out to this guy for getting a couple horror movies into the top comment on the music video for Call Me. As I mentioned, Scream's biggest gimmick is that it's very self-aware. Now I don't want to spoil it by showing the clip in case there are people that haven't seen Scream, but if I did show the clip, it would be this.
Corn syrup. Same stuff they use for pig's blood and curry.
So it's important to note that the first 3 Child's Play movies weren't like that. They were just like regular movies. And now all of a sudden, after Scream, Chucky has become very self-aware.
In fact, if it was a movie, it would take 3 or 4 sequels just to do it justice.
And there are all of these horror movie references, such as Chucky's head spinning around 180 degrees like the scene in The Exorcist, the character Damien Blaylock being a combination of 2 characters' names from The Omen, Chucky telling Tiff to turn to page 217 in the Voodoo for Dummies book, which is the same as the haunted room number in Stephen King's novel The Shining, Jade asking David this question.
David, you remember when you were seeing Brad Barker?
Which seems to be a combination of Brad Dourif, who plays Chucky, and Clive Barker, who created Hellraiser. Hellraiser is also referenced after Chucky and Tiffany take out Jade's uncle, Chief Kincaid, by launching these nails into his face using the van's airbag.
Why does that look so familiar?
That would be because he now resembles Pinhead, the iconic character in the Hellraiser movies. Hellraiser came out a year before Charles Lee Ray originally died, so it might have been one of the last movies he ever saw. In fact, if we take a closer look at this article about his death, the newspaper reporter includes an interview with Mike Norris, the police officer from Child's Play. He describes the scene as being like something out of a horror movie. There are some other non-horror references, like Tiffany Spider being named Charlotte and Officer Norton referring to Jesse as Boogie Nights. One of the mysteries of the franchise so far regards the Haitian deity Damballa, who Chucky calls upon to give him the power to transfer souls. We've heard this Damballa chant many times before, but this time we see it in writing inside of Tiffany's Voodoo for Dummies manual. That means that an English speaker, such as myself, can properly translate it for the first time. The Damballa chant is a French incantation, meaning, to the almighty Damballa, give me the power I beg of you, to the mercy of my soul, to the point of my death, hear me out from my condemned voice. Damballa is a Haitian entity, and if you're unaware, in Haiti, the official language is French, so that's why the incantation has to be in French. There's actually a recurring theme of French phrases being used in the movie. When Damien is cringefully trying to seduce Tiffany at the beginning, he tells her about the French saying, le petit morte, the little death, and invites her onto the bed to quote-unquote die a little. She asks him if he's ready for a ménage à trois, which is French for threesome, which is also a clue that Chucky is actually alive. But Damien doesn't quite get it.
What's that?
Finally, when Tiffany confronts the thieving couple at the Love Motel, she throws a bottle of champagne called Goût du Rance, or Taste of Rance, which is the capital of the champagne and wine growing region in France. Now, if you would please draw your attention to the boobs, you'll notice that Tiffany has a tattoo with Chucky's name on it, and the heart is getting stabbed by this little dagger. She actually transfers this tattoo to her doll body after her soul is transferred, during the scene where she dyes her hair and gives the doll a makeover to look more like her. I don't know what the point of going through all that was, because she's planning on transferring back into a human body like within the next 24 hours. Seems like a lot of wasted effort. But I think the tattoo shows that losing Chucky in the 1980s broke her heart. But I also find it interesting because in the first movie, that's how you defeat Chucky. Norris shoots him through the heart because his organs have turned human. However, Bride gives new meaning to rules from the first movie, where John Bishop told them that they had to destroy the heart. Maybe he didn't mean that they had to shoot Chucky in the heart, because that obviously only puts him down temporarily. Maybe he meant that they needed to destroy this amulet, the heart of Damballa. I don't quite get why they feel the need to retrieve the amulet though, because Chucky never attempts to get it in the first 3 Child's Play movies, and there is a later movie where he takes over a human body without the amulet, so I don't know. I don't have an answer on this one. But on the way to retrieve it, Chucky and Tiffany cause mayhem all around them, taking out several police officers and other bystanders, causing their chauffeurs, the young couple Jesse and Jade, to look very guilty as death follows them everywhere that they go. As they drive through the night, we hear one other song that I want to talk about, See You in Hell by Monster Magnet. This song contains the following lyrics. What time and snow couldn't bury, years of forgotten guilt, that little body's calling, rising up from under a Jersey landfill. Well, it isn't a landfill, but they're traveling to New Jersey, where the body of Charles Lee Ray would rise up from underground when his skeleton is exhumed to double check that he's really dead, because Chucky's been leaving Charles Lee Ray fingerprints behind at all the crime scenes. There's also the title of the song to consider, See You in Hell. Last episode I talked about how Chucky falling into the pit in the Devil's Lair dark ride symbolized him descending down into hell. So the title foreshadows this parting line in Bride.
Goodbye, darling. I'll see you in hell.
Chucky is able to finish Tiffany off though, so it ends up being Jesse who shovel yeets him into his own casket, where he starts freaking out. What's the matter, Chucky? You act like you've never seen a dead body before. The very last thing in this movie is the explosive birth of Chucky's offspring, which leads us into the next Chucky movie, Seed of Chucky. I'm not thrilled about covering that one, but if I want to get to curse, I'm gonna have to get through it. So check out that video on the left, and remember to subscribe to CZsWorld for new horrors every week, ring the death bell and select all notifications, and I will see you in the next one. Assuming we both survive.